Kimberly had always been adventurous, though in a measured way. At 27, she had embraced life's small surprises and sought comfort in the things she could control. She had a decent job, a cozy apartment, and a boyfriend named Harold, who had been her anchor for nearly 3 years. Kimberly's best friend Harold owned a charming barbershop in the heart of the city. The shop was always buzzing with chatter and the sound of scissors snipping through hair. Harold had built it from the ground up, a labor of love that reflected his passion for hairstyling. His barbershop was more than just a place to get a haircut. It was a sanctuary where people came to relax, unwind, and leave with a renewed sense of confidence. Kimberly visited the shop frequently, not just because of Harold's expert skills, but also because it felt like home. Harold and she had been friends since high school, and their bond was solid. When he opened his barbershop, Kimberly had been there every step of the way, lending a hand, painting walls, and even picking out furniture. Harold, Kimberly's boyfriend, occasionally teased her about her trips to the shop. "You might as well let him style your hair every week," he would joke, unaware that Kimberly valued these moments as a nostalgic escape to the simple times when she and Harold had dreamed about the future. Harold never felt threatened, though. He trusted Harold and knew that his girlfriend's loyalty was unwavering. One sunny afternoon, as Kimberly was sipping coffee in Harold's shop, admiring his latest collection of hair care products, Harold turned to her with a glint of excitement in his eyes. "Hey, Kim, how about we try something new with your hair today? What do you say?" His voice was light, but there was an underlying eagerness that caught her attention. Kimberly looked at him, taken aback. "I don't know. I just had it trimmed a couple of weeks ago. Besides, I'm kind of attached to my long hair, you know?" Harold shrugged, his grin widening. "Come on, live a little. You trust me, right? I promise it'll be fun. Just a little change to freshen things up." She hesitated. Harold had styled her hair countless times, and he had never once let her down. His instincts were usually spot on, whether it was adding layers, changing the color, or simply styling it for a night out. And deep down, she did trust him. After all, he was her best friend. "All right," she conceded with a nervous chuckle. "Just don't do anything too crazy, okay?" Harold clapped his hands together, his face lighting up. "You got it. You're in for a treat." Kimberly sat down in the barber's chair, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Harold draped the cape around her shoulders and fastened it snugly around her neck. The chair felt strangely comfortable, and the hum of the barbershop around them provided a sense of familiarity that put her at ease. She took a deep breath, glancing at herself in the mirror. This was Harold. She was in good hands. Harold started with a few snips here and there, trimming the ends, adding a few soft layers to frame her face. Kimberly closed her eyes, letting the sound of the scissors lull her into a state of relaxation. The sensation of her hair being handled so expertly was almost therapeutic. Then Harold paused, his hands hovering above her hair. Kimberly opened her eyes and caught his reflection in the mirror. He had that mischievous look again. "Hey, Soph, I was thinking..." He began slowly, his tone casual. "What if we went a little shorter? Something bolder?" She raised an eyebrow. "How short are we talking?" He shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just short. You know, something chic and edgy." Kimberly hesitated, her heart skipping a beat. She had never gone super short before. Her hair was her security blanket, a part of her identity. But she also trusted Harold and knew he had a knack for making things look good. She bit her lip, weighing her options. "Okay, but just don't go too crazy," she finally agreed, her voice shaky. Harold nodded, a wide grin spreading across his face. "You got it. You're gonna love this, I promise." Kimberly closed her eyes again, relaxing into the chair. She heard the sound of the scissors moving faster now, the snips coming in quick succession. She felt the weight of her hair lighten as Harold worked his magic. Everything seemed fine, and she began to relax even more, trusting that Harold knew what he was doing. But then she heard a sound that made her eyes snap open, the unmistakable buzz of clippers. Her heart jumped into her throat. "Whoa, what's that?" she asked, her voice tight. Harold laughed softly. Relax, it's just to clean up the edges a bit. I promise, no funny business. Kimberly glanced at the clippers warily, but then sighed, deciding to trust him. After all, he was her best friend. He would never do something she didn't want. She closed her eyes again, trying to calm her racing heart. The hum of the clippers grew closer, and then she felt it. A strange sensation as the clippers ran up the back of her head. Her eyes flew open in shock. "What are you doing?" she gasped, reaching up instinctively, but Harold gently pushed her hands back down. "Relax, Kim. Just trust the process. You're going to look amazing, I swear," he said soothingly, though there was a firmness in his tone that made her uneasy. Before she could react, he moved the clippers again, this time higher up the side of her head. She watched in horror as chunks of her long, beautiful hair fell to the floor. Panic welled up inside her, and tears sprang to her eyes. "Harold, stop! I didn't ask for this," she cried, trying to pull away from the chair. But he held her steady, his grip surprisingly strong. "Kimberly, just let me finish. I promise you'll thank me later," he said, his voice steady but with a strange edge to it that made her feel trapped. She started to cry, sobs shaking her shoulders as the reality of what was happening set in. She was losing her hair, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Harold, the friend she trusted the most, was shaving her bald. It felt like a nightmare. In what felt like an eternity, Harold continued, moving the clippers methodically until there was nothing left but a smooth, bald surface. Kimberly sat in the chair, stunned and tearful, her eyes fixed on her reflection. She was unrecognizable. The woman staring back at her was not the Kimberly she knew. Her hands reached up to touch her bare scalp, trembling. I can't believe you did this," she choked out, tears streaming down her face. She felt a mixture of anger, betrayal, and overwhelming shame. Harold stepped back, seemingly satisfied with his work. "You look incredible, Kim. You just need to get used to it. Trust me, this is a new beginning for you." She shook her head, unable to comprehend his words. "I didn't want this. How could you?" Harold sighed, placing the clippers down. "Listen, sometimes we don't know what we need until it happens. But look, if it makes you feel any better." He grabbed the clippers again and ran them over his own head without hesitation. In minutes, he too was bald. "There," he said, forcing a smile. "Now we match." But Kimberly couldn't find comfort in his actions. Her heart was pounding, her skin flushed with humiliation. She wanted to crawl into a hole and hide. She grabbed a hat from the counter, pulling it over her head to cover her shame. I need to go," she muttered, standing up on unsteady legs. She didn't look at Harold as she stumbled towards the door, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Outside, she fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking. She needed to call Harold, needed someone to comfort her, to tell her that it was going to be okay. But even as she dialed, she knew that things would never be the same again. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and anger. Harold was supportive, but Kimberly could feel the tension growing between them. She was distant, wrapped in her own turmoil, ashamed of what she had become. She wore a hat everywhere, hiding her bald head, avoiding mirrors and social interactions. Harold tried to reach out, but she ignored his calls and texts. She couldn't bear to face him, the person who had crossed a line she didn't even know existed. Their friendship felt shattered, a fragile thing broken beyond repair. Weeks passed, and the strain in her relationship with Harold grew. They fought over trivial things, the underlying issue always being her self-esteem and how disconnected she felt. Eventually, the inevitable happened. One evening, after a heated argument, Harold sighed heavily and looked at her with sad eyes. "I love you, Kimberly, but I don't know how to help you anymore. You've changed, and I don't think it's something I can fix." Kimberly's heart broke at his words, but she knew he was right. She had changed, and not just because of the haircut. Something inside her had shifted, and it scared her. They hugged one last time, a tearful goodbye, and he left. Months later, Kimberly stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her hair had started to grow back, a short stubble that was a stark contrast to the bald head she had despised. She still wore hats, but less frequently now. It had taken time, therapy, and a lot of self-reflection, but she was slowly reclaiming her sense of self. Harold and she never rekindled their friendship. The trust was broken, and some wounds were too deep to heal. She heard that he had sold the barbershop and moved to another city, a fresh start for them both. As she ran her hand over her short hair, Kimberly took a deep breath. This was a new beginning, not the one Harold had envisioned for her, but one she was creating for herself. And this time, she was in control.